They're still alive. Anthony, they are still alive. Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of Trojan Dash. USC is still alive, whether or not we expected this day to come. It has come. USC has earned its spot in the Sweet 16. Anthony, tell me how you're feeling right now.
Man, I'm feeling pretty good. Better than last week. I could definitely say that. What about you?
Yeah, I look, I thought it would happen. I picked it in my bracket, but as soon as my bracket, the first round, right? I get 28 of the 32 first round games right. I'm feeling incredible. Round of 32, the first day my bracket starts to crumble. And as soon as it gets to the USC-Kansas game, which is the last game of the first weekend, which makes way too much sense because, of course, they're going to make us wait that long. I'm like, there's no way. I picked USC to win, therefore there's no way they lose. They win by 34 points. They won by 34 points, Anthony.
Yeah, I mean, no, I mean, I asked you that day how you were feeling, and you were scared, and I was also scared. I didn't think they were going to win by 34, but geez, man, what a performance.
Yeah, you asked me how my gut felt about that game, and I said bad, but deep down, I knew they were going to win that game. I didn't want to jinx it. So I said they were going to lose. The reverse jinx worked. They won by 34 points. Unbelievable stuff. But let's talk about the first weekend for the Trojans. They beat Drake pretty handily. It wasn't a blowout. It wasn't really a tight game after, about 5 minutes to go in the second half. It was a 3-point game, 40-37 at halftime. They kind of pulled away from there. And then Kansas, you come out, they were favored. They were actually favored by like one or 2 points, but I don't think anybody was expecting them to win by double digits, and they won by 34. Obviously, a blowout there, start to finish. It was just all Trojans all the way. When it was halftime, it was 40-21, and I was still like, okay, there's a lot of basketball left. I wasn't ready to talk myself into the fact that the Trojans were in the Sweet 16 at that point, and they ended up winning the second half by 15 points, winning 85-51 overall. Pretty complete performance, awesome offense, awesome defense, everything you wanted to see out of the Trojans. Anthony, give me your takeaways. We decided we were only going to do the pros because there aren't very many cons, especially from that Kansas game, which was their most recent game. So give me, I guess if you want to throw in a few negative notes, you can be that guy, but give me your main takeaways from the first two games of March Madness for USC.
Yeah, I will try to not be that guy, but first I want to shout out Drake. They had a good run. Just because Drake's my favorite rapper, like I mentioned last week, I'll give him a shout out. Kansas, obviously, they had a nice run too. But yeah, lots of pros. I think the main things, the defense really showed up, and Isaiah Mobley. I think he read my column about 10 times maybe before those two games because he came out very aggressive. I think he didn't miss a single three against Kansas, and that was really a game changer. We've said it multiple times, when he's aggressive on offense, it really makes his team unbeatable in a sense. And we saw it this weekend. In terms of Drake and really Kansas, their defense was just outstanding. I mean, they were able to shut them down. It seemed like both teams were uncomfortable on offense. Kansas, I think, shot about 29% from the field in that game, which is just ridiculous. And they really kept Joseph Yusufu in check after he had a hot first half. And their defense was just overwhelming. Their length was very overwhelming. We've seen it so many times in the regular season, but it came to fruition in the tournament. And another thing really was their rebounding. They were able to control the rebounding margin. They were also able to get people involved. And, against Kansas, obviously it was a blowout, but I think there were 4 or 5 Trojans that were in double figures, which is amazing to see. And I think the first game, there was about 3 or 4, which is, they're undefeated when they have 3 or more players in double figures. So it's going to be something that they're going to have to do each game if they want to win. The one con I really have, it's very small just because I like to be picky, but Tajiri, he hasn't been shooting really well. The first game, it didn't really have a big impact because he still had 10 assists and he had a turnover, and the turnover wasn't really a big one. But, that's the main con, or really not really main, but the small con that I see. He's got to get himself going. He's a streaky player. But, it doesn't really matter when you have Drew Peterson stepping up and Isaiah White. Geez, Isaiah White came alive. He had 3 threes. And then, obviously, Ethan Anderson was playing better. And then Chavez Goodwin, who was outstanding, really, in my opinion, in both games. So, I mean, when these players are stepping up, and obviously Max Apompolo has been playing great, and he played great. There were not a lot of cons, like we said, but their defense was just ridiculous. I mean, I was at home watching. I felt as uncomfortable as Kansas was on offense because I was kind of like, well, they have nothing to do. Like, I don't understand what they can do, and USC just put them in a blender, and it really didn't seem like they were at all on the same level of play. But just the defensive intensity, and then one thing we talked about, my last thing, they came out of the gates firing in both games, really, especially Kansas, very energized, high energy. They were active on defense, active on really both sides of the ball, but especially on defense. And they were looking to be aggressive, and there was a lot of confidence. And Isaiah Mobley's talked about it. When this team is confident, not a lot of teams can beat them. So we'll have to see what happens in the next round. But those are the main pros for me.
Yeah, I think the thing that you and I have been talking about for the last couple of weeks now is that this offense can't just be Evan Mobley. And Evan can go out and give you 26 on any given night against any given defense, and that's great. But if you're not going to have guys around them like Taj Edey, like Drew Peterson, like Isaiah Mobley, this team's not going to go very far. And I was kind of worried about Taj Edey because I was like, well, if Evan's the only guy and Edey's not really facilitating the offense, there's not really much that this team can do. I guess I was wrong. I mean, look, Taj wasn't, as you said, on his game necessarily against Kansas, but they still went out there and scored 85 points. Isaiah White hit multiple threes. It seemed like he was from the same spot every single time, and they kept on leaving him open. So I don't really know what that was all about. Isaiah Mobley, did you know Amar Ross on the season from beyond the three-point line, that is best on the team percentage-wise, 67%. But if we take that out, because it's 3 threes, do you know who the team leader in three-point percentage is for the Trojans this year?
It's Isaiah Mobley, isn't it?
It's Isaiah Mobley. That's insane. That is ridiculous. And look, of course, he hasn't taken as quite as many threes as Drew Peterson, as Taj Edey, but still, he's taken a sizable number of threes, and he's taken a bunch recently, and he's been making them. I think he was 4 for 5 against Kansas. I think he made his first 4. And he had like step backs working in there, and it was like there were times when he was at the top of the key, 5 seconds left on the shot clock, and I was like, the guy's just going to shoot it. And I felt good about him shooting that early on in the season. You know, I wasn't crazy about him taking threes because I don't know, he wasn't making as many as he has been now. And it just seems like he's a more effective player inside the paint. But now, if you're going to leave him open like that, take the shot, and he's been making them. So that's been awesome to see. Evan Mobley, once again, was phenomenal as the defensive end. I thought the thing about Kansas that, you know, at first gave me some slight pause, but when I thought about it, not really, is that they shot, what'd you say their field goal percentage on the game was? Something like 29, 30%?
Yeah, 29%.
Yeah. And it, outside of the first like 1 or 2 minutes, it wasn't like they were getting a bunch of open shots and then not hitting them. There were a couple early on in the game before the first media timeout where they were open, they had open threes, they just were missing. But it felt, even in those first few minutes and then from the rest of the game too, they just weren't getting any open looks. They had nowhere to go, nowhere down low, nowhere on the perimeter. And we've been talking about their perimeter defense all season. It was actually great. They weren't getting any open looks. The rotations were awesome. At every scheme they were pulling on defense was just incredible. So obviously, when you hold Kansas to 51 points, that's going to be a pretty great sign. 21 points in the first half. I don't know if there's much more that you can ask for. And then you have guys hitting threes at the clip that they were. 61%. They were 11 of 18 from beyond the arc. That's not sustainable. Look, I'm not going to tell you that they're going to come out every single game and hit, 11 of their 18, 61% of their threes. But the fact that they're confident, the fact that guys who aren't known as knockdown 3-point guys, like, the two Isaiahs, Mobley and then White, and guys like Peterson was hitting some of his threes, and then Mobley wasn't Evan Mobley wasn't taking a bunch, but we've seen that he can hit them. And then Taj Edey, I think it's only a matter of time before he sort of gets going once again. And then Chavez Goodwin down low was awesome, and Ethan Anderson. Look, I've been critical of Ethan Anderson. That's your guy, and I've hated to have to do it, but I've been critical of him in weeks past. Ethan Anderson got me. He played great. I think he led the team in turnovers with like 3, but he was playing a lot of that game, and the offense was sort of going through him. So I'm not really concerned about that at all. But it just seemed like he was playing smart basketball. He was playing controlled basketball. I think that where we've seen him run into some problems is where he has one speed and it's like 120%, and then the ball's flying all over the place, and it's just, either that or it's totally stagnant. I think for him at times there's been sort of no in between. I think we saw that perfect balance against Kansas, which is what we've been needing to see for a long time, because we've talked about it all season. When he's on his game, he's a really important part of this offense, and the fact that he was playing the way he did is obviously great to see. I said we're not going to give too many cons, so I'm sort of going to go against my own rules here. But the free throws, man, 10 of 17, that's what, 59%, 58.8. Not great. Of course, it isn't great. When they win by 34 points, it's not, a huge concern. But I guess the part where the concern comes in is that you think, okay, they're not going to win every game by 34 points, not 24 points, not 14 points. 4 points might even be a pretty significant win. And if they're hitting 58% of their free throws, we talk about this every single week. Those close games are going to be kind of hard to win. So I guess that's my only con. But the defensive effort, incredible. Andy Enfield, look, the confidence of this team, I think you sort of touched on this, but it's so important to this team. Andy, coach, he said in the post-game press conference, right? He said that I forget which coaches exactly were there. It was like Coach Hart, Coach Mobley, some of the other guys. And Coach Mobley, he said he pulls out his phone. And there were these two guys in some like CBS studio picking the game somewhere. And he's like, they're undisciplined. Andy Enfield coach teams can't win, and they're not disciplined, whatever. And in his post-game press conference, he actually thanked those two guys for picking Kansas and talking bad about the Trojans. So this team's confident. This team knows that they're sort of starting to get the recognition that I think that they've deserved for a long time now. And it's great to see. And I think that confidence is only going to serve them well in a game against Oregon, which obviously the storylines on the year have been plenty, right? The Pac-12, people have been talking about this a lot, especially from the Trojan side. USC went 15-5, Oregon 14-4. And look, I get that they agreed upon these rules before the season began. In my opinion, so I'm not gonna complain about this or say that the Pac-12 title was like stolen, which is a word that's being thrown out there that I kind of don't agree with. In my opinion, when both teams are 10 games over 500 and they played a head-to-head game and the team with 15 wins won that head-to-head game, they should be the conference champion. Again, that's not how it should be this season because they agreed to that. I'm just saying the Trojans have a gripe with the fact that Oregon won the Pac-12, and I don't entirely blame them. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't blame them either. I mean, I would be upset if you feel like you're playing great the whole time and then you lose it off of. Well, first of all, I want to talk about one thing, and that's Oregon State, because you tweeted it, and I really agree that the fact that they had to beat Oregon to win the Pac-12, and right when they lose that game, they decide to become the greatest team in college basketball history, winning how many, 5 games, 6 games in a row? I mean, they could have just win that one game, and we wouldn't even be talking about this, but that's neither here nor there. Still, yeah. I think it's definitely a storyline. Isaiah Mobley seems very upset. His post-game press conference was funny because he kind of, he was shading them. He was kind of saying that they had gotten lucky in terms of winning it. I don't know if it was more of luck, but I think USC had opportunities to win it. But this is what creates a great March Madness matchup. And I think, Oregon, obviously, I'm not going to say they didn't deserve it because they won the games that mattered. And they had a great pause, or they had a long pause for COVID. I think, wasn't it twice that they were paused?
Yeah. And then the VCU game. Yeah.
Yeah. And they still managed to win the Pac-12, and then their game against VCU gets canceled, or they just advance, and then they blow the doors out on Iowa. So I mean, this is a team that's definitely not lucky. They're really talented. And Andy Enfield also mentioned it too, that he was upset. He said it doesn't make any sense why we're playing a Pac-12 team in the Sweet 16, and why this is happening in terms of Oregon. And it's a storyline that they've been building up. I'm just worried that Oregon is going to use it for fuel and be like, hey, you guys don't think we're legit. And they come out with a lot of energy and all that and try to take them out. But in terms of just USC, I think this is a game that they should want. They should want to prove that they're the champions of the conference, and there's really no other better place to do that in terms of March Madness. You got to win this game. You advance to your first Elite Eight since 2001. And he also avenged that Pac-12 championship loss. I think this is a perfect scenario for them. Will they come out? That's the question. I mean, so far we've seen them do it, but it's a really I'm very intrigued to see this matchup. I really
Yeah,
am.
yeah. Look, for me, a lot of people have been talking about the fact that these two teams playing in the Sweet 16 is weird. It's a bad thing because we'll get into some of the some of the Pac-12's other success in the next 10 minutes or so because there's been a lot of it. But look, for me, in my opinion, I love it. I love having these two teams square off for the chance to go to the Elite Eight. I think it's awesome. I think especially with the way that the Pac-12 played out. Also, the people assembling the bracket, like I don't know if they really anticipated this being the matchup. Right, there had to be two. The Oregon had to beat Iowa to get here, and the Trojans had to beat Kansas. And I don't know if like both of those things happening and the chance that these teams would square off in the Sweet 16 was necessarily something that they were like, I don't know, should have been trying to avoid or something that they like should have been watching for. So I'm all for it. I'm a fan of it. I don't think it's a huge deal that like one team is guaranteed to go home because one team is guaranteed to move on. And I think that that's a great thing. But I definitely had some of those concerns about Oregon using that as fuel because you have, the Trojans talking about how they stole the Pac-12 title, all that. And they're like, I mean, they have a reasonable case for themselves that they absolutely did not steal the title. They just kind of won it because the Trojans won, three of their final 6 conference games. So there's something to be said for that. But as far as a matchups, X's and O's kind of thing, I actually think this is somewhat favorable for the Trojans. And the reason I say that is I see this more as a battle between the Trojan defense versus the Oregon offense rather than vice versa. I think USC's offense versus Oregon's defense, you kind of somewhat know what you're going to get, right? I don't think they're necessarily going to be held in check. I don't think they're going to necessarily explode either, right? We talked about how 61% from 3 is unsustainable. They're not going to go out and do that again. Maybe they shoot 45 or 50, but I don't see them putting up 85 plus points. I don't see them putting up 70 or fewer points. But I think when you have a team or when you have an offense like the Ducks do, that just put up 95 points against Iowa and a defense like the Trojans do that held Kansas to 51, I sort of think about, okay, that definitely makes for an intriguing matchup. But the reason I say that it favors the Trojans is that I think Kansas's offense is better than Iowa's defense is. Iowa's defense is worse than Kansas's offense. Iowa's defense is worse than Kansas's offense is bad, right? Like scoring 95 points against Iowa, impressive, but Iowa's defense is horrendous, right? It's just terrible. We knew that was going to be this team's, kryptonite, the thing that was going to bring this team down. Garza's a phenomenal player, but this team just can't defend. So the fact that they put up 95 points, yeah, impressive. They shot 44% from 3. That's probably not sustainable too. Probably see that number come down quite a bit. But the fact that USC held Kansas to 51 points, Kansas is a good offensive team. McCormick, right? They have so many scorers, so many playmakers, and they just did nothing against the Trojans. So for me, I'm taking more out of USC holding Kansas to 51 than I am Oregon putting up 95 against Iowa. I think that the USC-Oregon matchup, which will become a matchup of USC's defense versus Oregon's offense, is going to favor USC slightly. I don't think it's going to be a blowout because these teams are pretty evenly matched. And then we saw how they matched up in, end of February, early March, end of February, I think, with the Trojans getting out to that one 17-1 start, holding Oregon to like 19 points in the first half. Ended up winning that. Maybe I have the Oregon and Stanford game mixed up. Whatever. They ended up winning that 72-58. I think it's a good matchup for USC. I could see them losing, but given the competition that they faced last round, I think there's a reason to take the Trojans here. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you really touched upon all of it. It's a perfect matchup in the sense that USC has that defensive versatility to match up with Oregon, and Oregon is a really streaky team. They've got tremendous shooters. They've got a great forward, but at the end of the day, the question is, can they stop USC on offense too? USC's offense is obviously not as powerful, but they've still got some weapons, and they're playing very confident, and they are favored. And that's a fun fact. Andy Enfield, going back to his days with Florida Gulf Coast, if you remember, he was the 15th seed. He's been in every game that he's not been favored, he's undefeated against the spread. And now they're favored, which I mean, I don't know, it might be vice versa, but this is going to be a perfect matchup in the sense that USC has the capability to defend. The perimeter obviously is the question. Can they defend the perimeter? So far, they've kind of shown that they've been able to do that. And USC is taller. They're bigger. I think the matchup is going to be important to see if Isaiah Mobley is going to be more assertive now too, if he's going to be as assertive, because this is not a big Oregon team, and they don't play as deep. They're about I would say like an 8-man, 7-man rotation, 8-man at most, where USC on the other hand can go 9, maybe even 10 if they want to. So it's a perfect matchup in the sense that their defense can really have the ability to stop them. But I agree with you. Don't think it's going to be a blowout. I think it's going to be a grinder. It's going to be a game where USC has got to be very focused on the defensive end, and try to get easy baskets on offense. Don't overthink it. This is a team that they've played. They played obviously in February, but I remember some people were saying, I think it might have been Isaiah Mobley or Andy Enfield, saying that it's easy to prep because it's a Pac-12 conference opponent. You kind of know what to expect. But I think it's a good matchup for them. Even though Oregon put up 95 against Iowa, I think there's multiple teams that could probably put up 80 against Iowa.
Yeah.
So that's not too big of a deal. But the defense is going to be the main question. I think USC has the ability to do that.
The other thing that I think favors USC in this matchup is that I was watching the Oregon-Iowa game, and it was a fast-paced game. Oregon was just running, and by the middle of the second half, Iowa just looked gassed, right? And what you saw in the USC-Kansas game was the Trojans game down so much, and they were controlling the entire tempo. And I think that if they can do that against Oregon, because I think USC is the type of defense that can really dictate the tempo of a game, and if they can do that, if they can make Oregon grind the way Kansas did on every single possession on the offensive side, they're going to get tired. They're going to get gassed by, 10 minutes left in the second half, and then the Trojans are going to have a field day. So I think that the pace is definitely something that if USC's defense comes out and performs like we think it can, that's something that's definitely going to favor them too. Should we talk about Gonzaga at all? If USC wins this game, they play the winner of Creighton Gonzaga. I don't think we see Creighton reasonably winning that game. The Zags are favored by something like 12.5, 13.5 points. Let's say USC meets up with Gonzaga, and we'll only spend a minute or two on this. Do they have any shot?
Well, I'll leave it at one thing. I was reading an article, and a coach from Gonzaga's conference, who I have no idea what their name is. That's how bad the conference is. I don't even know the name of the conference. Said that this is a matchup that actually USC can probably pose potential because of their length and their size, and they haven't played a team with this size. But I'd rather not get ahead of myself at all, because we all know Gonzaga is not fair. They're very OP. That's all I'm going to say. But I really do, there's a slight, just like maybe like 5%, 10%. Yeah. I feel like maybe USC, the length, they can disrupt them a little bit, because that was a good point, because Gonzaga hasn't played a team as tall as the Trojans, and they haven't played a team as versatile on defensive end. But that's really it. I mean,
look, Gonzaga can just score from everywhere. They can shoot, they can burn you down low. It's obviously more difficult to do that against the Mobleys, especially Evan. But dude, I think the Elite Eight would be awesome for this team to reach if Creighton were to somehow beat Gonzaga, which is not going to happen. But if that were to somehow happen, then we'd be talking about a different ballgame here, and I think they could definitely take Creighton. But I'm just saying, if they were to beat Oregon and go to the Elite Eight and then get crushed by Gonzaga, it's fine. Look, it's fine. Okay, we didn't even know that they were going to get to the Sweet 16. They're there. It's been fun. Gonzaga's probably going to win the national championship. Of course, they need to take care of Oregon first, but the only reason we're the Elite Eight is because it would be before our next show. So we have to throw that in there as well. But obviously, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. We only have 6 minutes left. I want to get to one more topic that has been dominating national headlines so far, something that I have some thoughts about. The Pac-12 is, to this point, 10-1 in March Madness. You have 3 wins from UCLA, 2 wins from Oregon State, number 12 seed, going to the Sweet 16. The Bruins are the number 11 seed, and then you have number 7 Oregon versus number 6 Trojans. Colorado went 1-1, beating number 12 Georgetown before losing to number 4 Florida State in a pretty bad game for the Buffs. But the Pac-12 has been dominating. The Big Ten has had 9 teams in March Madness. Only one of them, Michigan, is in the Sweet 16. That was pretty much generally agreed upon as the unanimous best conference in college basketball. Anthony, what do you think the way March Madness has played out means for the Pac-12 in relation to some of the other major conferences like the Big 12 and the Big 10?
Yeah, well, that Birdman meme, put some respect on my name. That's what everyone in the Pac-12 should be tweeting out, because look, everyone thinks the Pac-12 not that good. They always talk about the Big 12, the Big 10, the ACC, the SEC, all these other conferences. I think this tournament really shows the Pac-12 can compete with every conference, in my opinion. And I think that's what we've been seeing in terms of, first of all, Oregon State. They've been outstanding, 12 seed. They have a chance to even make it to the Elite Eight. I think Loyola Chicago wins, but the Pac-12 has been outstanding the entire tournament, and it kind of shows that they don't get the praise just because they're on the West Coast time, just because the games tip off later, people aren't paying attention more, and also because the games are on the Pac-12 network. Most people aren't even able to tune it in unless they find a stream. So I mean, that's another thing. But I think the one winner in all of this Pac-12 madness is Bill Walton, because he always talks about the Conference of Champions and all that, and we always make jokes in the memes. He's kind of right at this point. I mean, if you look at what happened with the Big 10 and look at the Big 12, the ACC has kind of been in shambles, and SEC is, nothing crazy. But 4 teams right now in the Elite Eight, or excuse me, the Sweet 16. And, if Colorado plays a better game, could have been 5. But I mean, this is still it's an extremely successful tournament for the conference. I know you think otherwise, but I definitely think that they match up better than people expected.
Look, I think it's no doubt been a successful tournament for the Pac-12 and utter unmitigated disaster for the Big 10. But I was sort of thinking about this in the context of the opening weekend and everything that went well for the Pac-12 and bad for the Big 10. And I was feeling some type of way about this, and I couldn't really put it together into a thought that made sense until I listened to the Eye on College Basketball podcast, a great podcast. And they were talking about this same topic, and they were saying, is this more a reflection of the Big 10 being overrated, or is it more a reflection of the fact that they underperformed in a single elimination crapshoot tournament? And I think I tend to side with more of the latter, right? And I think on the flip side, the same thing kind of goes for the Pac-12. The fact that they had no ranked teams for pretty much the entire season was wrong, right? You have 3 teams in the Ducks, the Trojans, and the Buffaloes that I think could have been ranked for most, if not all season, right? But when you go to the tournament and you go 10-1, obviously great success for those teams, but I just don't know if you can take a sample size like this and say, oh, this automatically means that the Pac-12 is somehow bigger than the Big 10. Underrated for sure. But I'm hearing the Big 10 isn't that much better than the Pac-12 now. The Big 10 isn't even the best conference in college basketball. You could make an argument for that, but I think I tend to side with more of, look, it's a single elimination tournament. You have teams like Oral Roberts, Ohio State, and it's something that it doesn't happen a lot, but if those teams were to play each other 10 times, Ohio State wins 8 or 9 of them, right? So I think that just the nature of March Madness and the way that the tournament works and the way that we've seen it work in previous years, anything can happen. And I think there's also something to be said for the fact that playing an entire Big 10 season wears teams out, right? Ohio State, look, Oral Roberts is not better than Ohio State. North Texas, probably not better than Purdue, even though I picked that upset in my bracket. Loyola Chicago, great team, probably not better overall than the Fighting Illini, right? And then you have teams like Michigan, good team, right? I don't know if they're necessarily going to go to the Final Four, but they're still a solid team. Maryland is a great team. They just ran into Alabama, who shot 16 of 33 from threes. And granted, they won that game by 24 points, so it wasn't like that made the difference. But my point is, it's been a disaster for the Big Ten for sure. It's been a surprising success for the Pac-12. There's no question about that. You're going 10-1. A quarter of the teams in the Sweet 16 are from the Pac-12. But I'm going to pump the brakes a little bit. I'm not going to jump the gun and say that all of a sudden the Pac-12 rivals the Big Ten now and it's a toss-up between those two conferences. I think the Pac-12 is definitely underrated. Not going to go so far as to call the Big Ten overrated, but that's sort of where I stand. Of course, it's been a success. It's been awesome to see. Pump the brakes a tiny bit.
Yeah, you could definitely say that. I mean, that's a good point. One game elimination and all that. I mean, the old Roberts game for just for that one game. I mean, Ohio State had like five chances to win it, and they've missed
Yeah,
every single time. So I think people are getting excited, overhyped a little bit. I still think the Pac-12 is underrated, but
yeah, yeah,
it's
for
not
sure.
as close as the other conferences.
Yeah, definitely underrated. We know right now they're going to send at least one team to the Elite Eight. We don't know which team that might be, but it might be your USC Trojans. Anthony, any closing thoughts before we get out of here?
Well, I mean, if this is it, if this is the last pregame, USC basketball Trojan Dash, then what a run! Because I did not expect it to be this exciting, but hopefully they can extend it a little more. I mean, if they beat Gonzaga, I don't care what happens the rest of the year. I will be very satisfied.
Yeah, if they beat Gonzaga, look, I think if they beat Gonzaga, that might be the biggest upset of the entire tournament. And that's not just based on the seeds, it's based on the fact that the way I see things, it's Gonzaga and then a lot of space and then Baylor and then everybody else. So anybody who beats Gonzaga, hats off to them. We'll see. It could be the Trojans. You never know in March Madness, but that is going to do it for this week on Trojan Dash. As always, thank you to everybody for tuning in. Make sure to follow us on all of our various social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, not Snapchat, TikTok, Twitter. Check out all of our content at dashsports.tv. We do columns with Sports Pac-12. Anthony is doing some incredible work over there. We are looking forward to talking to you next week. We don't know if we are going to be happy or sad. That's something we're going to have to see play out this weekend. But thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you next time.